The sun hadn't cleared the ridge yet, but Eliza was already awake. She'd been awake most of the night, actually, staring at the ceiling boards of her father's bedroom, now her bedroom, counting cracks in the wood like they were days she had left. 7. The number kept circling back, a buzzard over a dying animal. She pulled on her boots, the leather cracked and stiff from too many seasons without proper oiling, and walked out onto the porch. The morning air was cool, deceptive. By noon, it would be a furnace. The land stretched out before her in shades of brown and gray, scrub brush, dried grass, the skeletal remains of what used to be decent grazing pasture. 2 years of drought had sucked the life out of the soil. The creek that ran through the eastern section was a memory now, just a scar of white stones cutting through dead earth. 12 cattle left. She'd started the year with 43. Eliza picked up the rifle leaning against the porch rail and checked the chamber out of habit. Loaded. Always loaded. Not that it mattered much, you couldn't shoot drought. Couldn't shoot debt, either, though she'd entertained the thought more than once when she pictured Lawrence Pritchard's smug face. Pritchard. The banker. The man who'd shown up exactly 1 week after her father's funeral with papers and sympathy that didn't reach his eyes. Just making sure you understand the situation, Miss Carter. Your father's loans are now your responsibility. The estate must settle its debts. $3,000, plus interest. She had $214 to her name, most of that from selling off equipment she'd need later, if there was a later. The sound of hooves pulled her attention to the road. A rider, coming slow. Not Pritchard. He traveled by carriage like he was too good for horseback. This was someone else. Eliza's hand drifted to the rifle, not raising it, just touching wood. Out here, strangers were either trouble or worse trouble. The rider was a man, lean and weathered, sitting his horse like he'd been born in the saddle. He wore a dusty coat that might have been black once, and a hat pulled low enough to shade most of his face. He stopped at the property line, polite or cautious, and waited. Eliza stepped off the porch, keeping the rifle barrel pointed at the ground, but her grip firm. "Help you with something?" The man pushed his hat back. His face was angular, stubbled, with eyes that looked too tired for someone who couldn't be much past 30. "Saw your fence down about a mile back, thought you might want to know." "I know. Right." He glanced around the property, taking it in without judgment, which was unusual. Most people looked at the place now and saw failure. "You hiring?" Eliza laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Do I look like I'm hiring? You look like you could use help." "Help costs money." "Not always." He swung down from his horse, moving careful, keeping his hands visible. Smart man. "I'm looking for work. Room and board's enough. I can fix fence, work cattle, handle repairs. Whatever needs doing." "What's your name?" "Caleb Rourke." "Well, Caleb Rourke, I can't pay you. Can barely feed myself, let alone hired help." "Then I'll work for meals. Stay in the barn if you got space." She studied him, suspicious. Nobody worked for nothing. "Why?" He met her eyes, and something in his expression was honest in a way that made her uncomfortable. "Because I need a place to stay for a while, and you need help." Seems simple enough. "Nothing's simple." "No," he agreed. "But it's still true." Eliza chewed the inside of her cheek, thinking. Pride said send him away. Desperation said she was a fool if she did. The fence wasn't going to fix itself, and she had exactly 7 days to figure out a miracle. "Barn's that way," she said finally, jerking her chin toward the weathered structure behind the house. "There's a cot in the tack room. Meals or whatever I can scrape together, which isn't much. You pull your weight, or you're gone. Understood?" "Understood." "And Rourke?" "Yeah?" "You try anything? I'll shoot you." The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair enough." He led his horse toward the barn, and Eliza watched him go, wondering if she'd just made a smart decision or the stupidest one of her life. Probably stupid, but then stupid seemed to be her specialty lately. Caleb was good as his word. By mid-morning, he'd found the tools, what few remained, and started on the fence line. Eliza worked the cattle, what was left of them, checking their condition and hating what she saw. Ribs showing, eyes dull. They needed better grazing, more water, things she couldn't give them. She found Caleb around noon, posts already reset, working wire with practiced hands. "You done this before," she said. Not a question. Some. Where? He didn't look up from the wire. Here and there. Worked ranches in New Mexico, Colorado, Texas for a while. Why'd you leave? Now he did look up, and his expression was carefully neutral. Seemed like time to move on, which meant he was running from something or someone. Eliza knew that look. She'd seen it in the mirror often enough since her father died, the look of someone carrying weight they didn't want to talk about. Long as your past doesn't follow you here, I don't care what it is. It won't. She nodded and turned to head back to the house, then stopped. There's bread and dried beef in the kitchen. Help yourself. Thanks. By evening, he'd finished the fence section and started on the barn door, which had been hanging crooked for 2 months. Eliza made a thin stew from the last of the vegetables and some questionable salt pork, and they ate in silence at the kitchen table. Her because she didn't know what to say, him because he seemed comfortable with quiet. How bad is it? He asked finally. The ranch? Yeah. Eliza set down her spoon. You want the polite version or the truth? Truth. I'm 7 days from losing everything. Bank holds paper on the land. $3,000 my father borrowed to dig a well that never found water. He died before he could pay it back. Now it's my problem. 3,000's a lot. It's impossible. I've got 200 and change. Been selling off everything that isn't nailed down, but it's not enough. Won't ever be enough. Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking. What happens in 7 days? Banker shows up with a contract. I sign over the deed, or he takes me to court and gets it anyway. Either way, I lose the ranch. There's always another way. Not out here, not for me. He looked at her across the table and his expression was serious. What if there was? What if there was what? Another way. Would you take it? Eliza laughed, sharp and humorless. Depends on the way. I'm desperate, Rourke, but I'm not stupid. Didn't think you were. He pushed back from the table, gathering his empty bowl. Just think about it. Sometimes the solution's not the one you expect. He left her sitting there, confused and annoyed, while he washed his dish in the basin and headed back to the barn. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Caleb worked, fixed things, tended things, made himself useful in a dozen small ways that added up. Eliza tried not to think about the calendar, about Pritchard, about the fact that she was running out of time and options. On the 4th morning, Caleb caught her by the well, staring down into the dry shaft like answers might be hiding at the bottom. I've got an idea, he said. Yeah? You're not going to like it. I don't like anything lately. Try me. He hesitated, choosing words carefully. What if we got married? Eliza stared at him. What? Hear me out. You've lost your mind. Just listen. If we got married, legal and official, I could put money into the ranch as your husband. I've got about $1,500 saved. It's not enough to cover the whole debt, but it's enough to negotiate with. You want to marry me for my debt? I want to help you keep your land. There's a difference. Eliza turned away, gripping the edge of the well so hard her knuckles went white. That's insane. You don't even know me. I know you're about to lose everything because a banker smells profit. I know you're fighting with nothing but grit, and you deserve better than that. And what do you get out of this? A place to stay, purpose, honest work. That's it? Caleb met her eyes. That's it. I'm not asking for anything else. This would be business, Eliza. Legal only. You keep your land, I keep moving when the time comes. Clean and simple. Nothing about this is simple. No, he agreed. But it might work. She wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him he was crazy and send him packing, but the calendar in her head kept ticking, and Pritchard's deadline kept getting closer, and she was so damn tired of fighting alone. I need to think about it. You've got 3 days. I know how many days I have. That night, Eliza lay awake again, turning the idea over in her mind like a stone she couldn't quite believe was real. Marriage. To a stranger. It was desperate and reckless, and probably the worst idea anyone had ever had. It was also the only idea on the table. By morning, she'd made her decision. She found Caleb in the barn, mucking stalls. If we do this, she said without preamble, it's business, nothing more. You keep to the barn, I keep to the house. We work the ranch together, but that's all. He straightened, leaning on the pitchfork. Agreed. And when the debt's paid, you're free to go, no strings. Understood. Then fine. We'll do it. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. There's a preacher in town. We can ride in tomorrow. Get it done. And Pritchard? We deal with him after, together. Eliza nodded, feeling like she was stepping off a cliff and hoping the ground wasn't as far down as it looked. All right, tomorrow then. The town of Redemption was 2 hours by horse, a collection of sun-bleached buildings clustered around a single dusty street. The preacher was a thin man with kind eyes who asked no questions when Caleb and Eliza showed up asking to be married. Maybe he saw desperation often enough to recognize it. Maybe he just needed the $5 Caleb handed him. The ceremony took 10 minutes. No guests, no flowers, no pretense. It was anything but exactly what it was. A legal arrangement between two people with no better options. You may kiss the bride, the preacher said. That won't be necessary, Eliza said quickly. Caleb didn't argue. They signed the papers, got their certificate, and rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed toward its brutal apex. Husband and wife. On paper, anyway. That evening, Caleb sat at the kitchen table with a pencil and paper, doing math. Between my $1,500 and your $200, we've got $1,700. We need $3,000. So we're $1,300 short, still drowning. Not if we negotiate. Pritchard wants this land. You said he thinks there's silver under it, right? That's the rumor. Then he's motivated. We use that. We offer him $1,700 now, plus a payment plan for the rest. We show him we're serious, that we can make it work. And if he says no, then we make it uncomfortable for him to say no. Eliza frowned. How? I know people who know things. Bankers don't get rich clean, Eliza. There's always dirt. We dig, we find it, and we give him a reason to deal. That's dangerous. So is losing everything. She couldn't argue with that. Demab. Pritchard showed up exactly 7 days after his first visit, arriving in his black carriage with papers ready. He looked pleased with himself, like a man about to foreclose on a widow was doing her a favor. Eliza met him on the porch. Caleb stood beside her, silent and watchful. Miss Carter, Pritchard said, climbing down from the carriage, I hope you've had time to consider. He stopped, noticing Caleb. Who's this? My husband, Eliza said, letting the word land like a stone. Pritchard's smile faltered. Your husband? Caleb Rourke. We were married 3 days ago. She watched Pritchard's mind work, recalculating. A husband changed things legally, made the situation more complicated. I see. Well, that doesn't change the debt, Mrs. Rourke. We know, Caleb said. That's why we're here to negotiate. Negotiate? Pritchard laughed. There's nothing to negotiate. The payment is due in full today. We have $1,700, cash, today. Caleb's voice was calm, level. The rest we'll pay over 12 months, $100 a month, plus interest. That's not the agreement. It's a new agreement, one that keeps everyone happy. Pritchard's eyes narrowed. And why would I accept that? Because the alternative is messy. Caleb stepped closer, his voice dropping. I've been asking around about you, Pritchard. Interesting things come up. Loans that went to friends at favorable rates, property seizures that benefited certain parties, books that might not add up quite right if someone looked close enough. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a deal. $1,700 now, the rest over time. You still get your money, we keep the land. Nobody has to dig into anybody's business. Pritchard's face went red. This is extortion. This is survival, Eliza said quietly. Take the deal or don't. But if you push this, we'll push back, and we've got nothing left to lose. The silence stretched out, tense and heavy. Pritchard looked between them, weighing his options, calculating odds. Finally, he pulled out his papers. Fine. $1,700 today, $100 a month for 13 months at 8% interest. Miss one payment, I take the ranch. Understood? Understood, Caleb said. They signed the papers right there on the porch, and Eliza counted out the money with shaking hands. When it was done, Pritchard climbed back into his carriage, his expression sour. "I'll be back next month," he said. "Don't be late." They watched him leave, dust rising behind the carriage wheels. "We just bought ourselves some time," Caleb said. "Time we still have to pay for." Eliza sat down on the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. $100 a month. How are we supposed to manage that? We figure it out, same as we figured this out. This was your money, Caleb, your savings. Why did you do it? He was quiet for a moment. Because I've lost things before, important things, and I know what it costs. He looked out at the land, the struggling ranch, the hard country that asked everything and gave back nothing easy. This place matters to you. That's reason enough. Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They sat in silence as the sun began its descent, two people bound by paper and desperation, wondering if they'd bought themselves salvation or just postponed the inevitable. Inside the house, the calendar still hung on the wall. 7 days had passed. 30 more stretched ahead before the next payment came due. The real work was just beginning. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Caleb worked the ranch with the kind of steady competence that came from years of hard experience. Eliza handled the cattle and the books, trying to stretch every dollar until it screamed. The $100 payments loomed over everything like a storm cloud that wouldn't break. On the 8th day after Pritchard's visit, Caleb came back from checking the northern section of the property with something strange in his expression. "What?" Eliza asked. "You know that old survey your father had done, looking for water? The one that cost him a fortune and found nothing? Yeah. I found the markers. They stopped about 50 yards short of the rock face." "So?" "So there's a seam in that rock. Might be nothing. Might be worth looking at." Eliza frowned. "You think there's actually silver?" "I think your father stopped digging too soon, and I think Pritchard's heard rumors for a reason. Hope was a dangerous thing. Eliza had learned that the hard way. But standing there in the dusty yard with a month's payment hanging over her head and nothing but hard land and harder luck, she couldn't quite kill the spark. "All right," she said. "Let's look." They rode out the next morning, tools packed, neither one saying what they were both thinking, that this was probably foolish, probably a waste of time, probably just another disappointment in a long line of them. The rock face was limestone, scarred and weathered, with a crack running vertical like a wound. Caleb studied it, running his hands over the stone, testing. "Here," he said. "If there's anything, it's behind this." They worked through the day, breaking rock, clearing debris, sweating under the relentless sun. By late afternoon, Eliza was ready to call it quits. Her hands were blistered, her back screamed, and they'd found nothing but more rock. Then Caleb's pick broke through into a hollow space, and the sound changed. They both froze. "Did you hear that?" Eliza whispered. Caleb was already widening the hole, clearing away stone with frantic energy. The hollow grew, and beyond it, silver. Not a massive vein, not a fortune, but real, visible silver running through the rock like a promise. Eliza sat down hard, staring. "Oh my God!" "It's not much," Caleb said, his voice careful. "But it's something. We work it careful, we might pull enough to make those payments, maybe more. My father was 50 yards away from this." "Yeah." She didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so she did neither. Just sat there in the dust and rock, looking at the impossible thing they'd found, feeling the weight shift just slightly. Still heavy, still crushing, but maybe, just maybe, bearable. "We don't tell anyone," she said. "Not yet. We work it quiet, sell it careful. Pritchard gets wind of this, he'll find a way to take it." Agreed. They covered the opening before heading back, marking it in ways only they would recognize. That night, Eliza lay awake again, but for once it wasn't dread keeping her up. It was possibility. Fragile and terrifying, but real. In the barn, Caleb couldn't sleep either. He stood in the doorway, looking at the house, thinking about the woman inside who fought like hell for something that mattered, thinking about the papers they'd signed, the arrangement they'd made. Business, she'd said. Clean and simple. But nothing about this felt simple anymore. The desert night was cool and clear, stars scattered across black sky like silver dust. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote called. Somewhere closer, the land they were fighting for breathed and waited. 7 days had become 30. 30 might become more. Time would tell if it was enough. Working the silver changed everything and nothing all at once. They still woke before dawn, still worked until their muscles screamed, still went to bed bone-tired and wondering if tomorrow would be the day it all fell apart. But now there was something else underneath it all. A thin thread of hope they were both afraid to pull too hard on. Caleb rigged a pulley system to haul rock out of the narrow shaft they'd opened up. Eliza learned to sort ore from waste stone, her hands developing new calluses on top of old ones. They worked in 2-hour shifts, one at the mine, while the other handled the ranch, switching off to keep up appearances. If anyone rode by, they'd see a struggling cattle operation, nothing more. The first month's payment to Pritchard came from the silver. Eliza rode into town alone, walked into the bank with exactly $100, and counted it out on his desk without a word. Pritchard's expression was somewhere between disappointed and suspicious. "Where'd you get it?" he asked. "Sold some cattle. Thought your herd was already depleted. We make do." She met his eyes, steady. "See you next month." She was halfway out the door when he called after her. "Mrs. Rourke, your husband, what's his story?" Eliza turned back, her hand on the doorframe. "Why do you care?" Man shows up out of nowhere, marries a woman he barely knows, throws money at her problems, makes a person curious. Then stay curious. My business is my business. Everything in this town is my business. Then you must be real busy. She left before he could respond, her heart pounding harder than it should. Pritchard was the type to poke at things until they bled. They'd have to be careful. When she got back to the ranch, Caleb was at the mine. She found him hauling up another load of rock, his shirt soaked through with sweat despite the cool morning air. "Pritchard's asking questions about you," she said. Caleb set down the rope, wiping his face with his sleeve. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that mean he's suspicious. Wants to know where you came from, why you're here." "What'd you tell him?" "Nothing, but he won't stop there." Caleb was quiet for a moment, staring down into the shaft. "My past isn't complicated, just not something I talk about." "Maybe you should. To me, at least. We're in this together now, and I don't like surprises." He looked at her then, something shifting in his expression. Resignation, maybe, or just exhaustion from carrying weight alone. "I had a ranch once, Colorado. Smaller than this, but it was mine. Had a partner, someone I trusted." He paused, choosing words. "He got into debt, made deals with the wrong people. When it went bad, he signed over the ranch to cover it. Didn't tell me until they showed up to take possession." "He stole from you." "Legally, he had the right. We were partners, both names on the deed. I fought it in court, spent everything I had on lawyers, lost anyway." His jaw tightened. "After that, I just moved. Worked ranches, saved money, tried not to get attached to anything I couldn't carry in a saddlebag." Eliza absorbed this, understanding clicking into place. "That's why you helped me, because you know what it's like to lose." "Yeah. And the money you put up, that was supposed to be for another place, your own place." "Was. Then I met you." He picked up the rope again. "Seemed like it'd do more good here." She didn't know what to say to that. The arrangement between them was supposed to be simple, transactional, but gratitude was complicated, and the way he looked at her sometimes made her chest feel tight in ways she didn't want to examine. "Well," she said finally, "thanks for telling me. Pritchard keeps asking, tell him I'm from Colorado and leave it at that. The less detail, the better." "All right." They went back to work, but something had shifted between them. Small, maybe imperceptible to anyone else, but they're all the same. The silver kept coming, not in huge quantities, but steady. They worked out a system. Caleb would take the ore into a different town, 3 hours east, where nobody knew them. He'd sell it to a dealer there, no questions asked, cash only. It wasn't getting them rich, but it was keeping them afloat. 6 weeks after finding the vein, they sat at the kitchen table counting money. Between the silver and selling off 2 steers, they had enough for the next payment plus a little extra. "We should invest in the herd," Eliza said. "Buy young stock. Rebuild." The mine's producing. Why risk it on cattle? Because silver runs out, land doesn't. Cattle are sustainable if we do it right. Caleb leaned back in his chair, studying her. You really think long term, don't you? Have to. This ranch is all I've got. I'm not just surviving month to month. I'm building something that lasts. Even with me in the picture. The question hung there, awkward and honest. They hadn't talked about the future beyond making payments, beyond keeping Pritchard at bay. This arrangement, Eliza said slowly, it's working. For now. But eventually, I'll leave. I know. I didn't mean, it's fine. That was the deal. He stood, gathering the money. I'll make the payment tomorrow. You handle the cattle. He left her sitting there, and Eliza felt something she couldn't name settle in her stomach. Relief, maybe. Or disappointment. She wasn't sure which was worse. That night, a storm rolled in, the first real rain in months. Eliza stood on the porch watching lightning split the sky, feeling the temperature drop, smelling moisture in the air. The land needed this. They all did. Caleb appeared beside her, not saying anything, just standing there watching the storm build. It's going to pour, Eliza said. Good. The first drops hit, fat and heavy, and within seconds it was a downpour. Rain hammered the roof, flooded off the eaves, turned the dust to mud. Eliza laughed, sudden and surprised, and stepped off the porch into it. Let the water soak her hair, her clothes, wash away weeks of grime and worry. When she looked back, Caleb was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. What? She called over the rain. He shook his head, almost smiling. Nothing. You just look different. Different how? Happy. The word caught her off guard. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had called her that. Couldn't remember the last time she'd felt it. But standing there in the rain with mud under her boots and water streaming down her face, she realized he was right. Come on, she said, waving him forward. It's just water. I'm fine here. Don't be stubborn. Get out here. He hesitated, then stepped off the porch. The rain hit him the same way it hit everything, hard and relentless and necessary. They stood there together, not talking, just being present in the moment while the desert drank its fill. When the storm finally passed, hours later, the world looked different, cleaner. The air smelled like creosote and wet earth. Somewhere in the dark, a frog croaked, the first one Eliza had heard in 2 years. Tomorrow's going to be muddy, Caleb said. Yeah. Can't work the mine in mud. Nope. So we take a day, rest. Eliza looked at him, this stranger who'd become something else, partner, ally, something she didn't have words for. Rest sounds good. They went inside separately, Caleb to the barn and Eliza to the house. But something had changed again. The spaces between them were getting smaller. The next morning dawned cool and damp, the sky washed clean. Eliza woke to silence. No wind, no distant sounds of work, just quiet. She made coffee and took a cup out to the barn. Caleb was already awake, sitting on a hay bale mending tack. Coffee, she said, holding out the cup. Thanks. He took it, their fingers brushing. Neither one pulled away as fast as they could have. I was thinking, Eliza said, about what you said. Building long term. You're right, we should invest in the herd, but we need water first, real water, not just what we catch. Your father tried that. He dug in the wrong place. We found silver 50 yards from where he stopped. Maybe the water's close too. Caleb considered this. Drilling's expensive. So's dying of thirst, and if we're going to make this ranch work, we need a reliable water source. We're barely making payments as is. I know, but think about it. If we find water, we can support more cattle. More cattle means more income. We get ahead of the debt instead of just treading water. He looked at her over the rim of the coffee cup, and something like admiration flickered in his eyes. You don't do anything halfway, do you? Can't afford to. All right, we'll look into it. But we keep working the mine, too. We need both. Agreed. They spent the morning walking the property, looking for likely spots. The old survey markers were still there, rusty and half-buried, marking the points where her father's well digger had tested and found nothing. Eliza studied the land with new eyes, trying to think like water, trying to see what her father had missed. Here, she said finally, pointing to a low spot where runoff from the hills would naturally collect. If there's groundwater anywhere, it'd be here. Caleb crouched, examining the soil. It's possible. We'd need equipment, though. A drilling rig. Johnson in town has one. He owes my father a favor from way back. That favor still good with you? Only one way to find out. They rode into town that afternoon, Eliza leading the way to a ramshackle property on the east side where Tom Johnson ran a well drilling operation. Johnson was a barrel-chested man in his 60s with hands like slabs of beef and a face that had seen too much sun. Eliza Carter, he said, breaking into a grin. Heard you got married. This the husband? Caleb Rourke. Caleb, Tom Johnson? They shook hands, Johnson sizing Caleb up with the practiced eye of someone who knew men and their measure. What can I do for you folks? Need a well drilled, Eliza said. You still owe my father that favor? Johnson's grin faded. I do, and I'll honor it. Your daddy helped me out when nobody else would. He looked between them. But Eliza, drilling ain't cheap even with a favor. Equipment, labor, the time it takes. I'll work it off, Caleb said. Whatever it costs, I'll pay in labor. You know drilling? I can learn. Johnson studied him for a long moment. All right. Here's the deal. I'll drill your well at cost for materials. No labor charge. But Rourke here works my crew for 2 weeks. We got contracts backed up, and I'm short-handed. Deal, Caleb said before Eliza could respond. They shook on it, and Johnson promised to bring his rig out the following week. On the ride back, Eliza was quiet. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. Yeah, I did. 2 weeks of labor is worth water. You said it yourself. She wanted to argue, to say something about how he kept giving, and what was she supposed to do with that? But the words stuck in her throat, so she just nodded and rode in silence. That night, they worked the mine by lantern light, pulling ore until midnight. Eliza's arms shook from exhaustion, but she kept going. Caleb finally called it. That's enough. We're going to hurt ourselves. One more load. Eliza, stop. She stopped, breathing hard, and sat down on a rock. Caleb sat beside her, both of them filthy and worn down. You're pushing too hard, he said. Can't afford not to. You can't afford to break yourself either. What good's the ranch if you're too hurt to work it? I'm fine. You're exhausted. We both are. He stood, offering his hand. Come on. Real rest. Not just a few hours. She took his hand, let him pull her up. His grip was solid, calloused, warm. He didn't let go right away, and neither did she. Caleb, I know, business arrangement. I remember. That's not what I was going to say. He waited, still holding her hand. I was going to say thank you for everything, for staying. I'm not... He stopped, reconsidered. You're welcome. They walked back to the house together, still holding hands, and only let go when they reached the porch. Caleb headed to the barn, and Eliza went inside, but the warmth of his hand stayed with her long after. Johnson's crew showed up the following week with equipment and attitude. The well digger himself was professional, but his 2 workers were the type who looked at a woman running a ranch and saw easy marks. They made comments, small ones at first, testing boundaries. Eliza ignored them, focused on showing Johnson the spot they'd chosen. Caleb didn't ignore them. He stepped between Eliza and the younger worker, a kid maybe 20 with more mouth than sense. Something funny? Caleb asked, his voice quiet. Just making conversation, the kid said, grinning. Make it somewhere else. The grin faded. We got a problem? Not yet. Like to keep it that way. Johnson intervened before it escalated, pulling his workers aside for a talk that involved pointed gestures and sharp words. After that, the comments stopped. They started drilling the next morning. The rig was loud, brutal, chewing through earth and rock with mechanical persistence. Eliza watched from the porch, coffee in hand, hoping this wasn't another expensive failure. Caleb joined Johnson's crew as promised, learning the work with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. By the 3rd day, even the mouthy kid was treating him with grudging respect. On the 5th day, they hit water. Eliza was in town buying supplies when one of Johnson's workers rode in at full gallop, yelling for her. By the time she got back to the ranch, water was flowing. Not a trickle, a real stream, clear and cold, pooling in the basin they dug. Johnson stood there grinning like he'd struck gold. Aquifer. Good one, too. This'll keep you supplied for years. Eliza dismounted slowly, walking to the well like she didn't quite believe it. She cupped water in her hands, tasted it. Clean, sweet, real. We did it, she said quietly. Caleb appeared beside her, soaked from helping contain the flow. Yeah, we did. She looked at him, this man who'd shown up out of nowhere, and kept saving her life in small and large ways, and something broke open inside her chest. Before she could think better of it, she threw her arms around him. Thank you, she said into his shoulder. Thank you, thank you. He went still for a moment, surprised. Then his arms came around her. You're welcome. They stood there while Johnson's crew worked around them, while water flowed and the desert drank, holding on to each other like lifelines. That night, they celebrated with whiskey Johnson had brought, the cheap kind that burned going down but felt appropriate for the occasion. The crew left after dark, taking their equipment and their noise. Eliza and Caleb sat on the porch, passing the bottle back and forth. Your father would be proud, Caleb said. You didn't give up. He taught me that. Stubbornness runs in the family. I've noticed. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months, maybe years. The whiskey helped, but it was more than that. Things were actually working. Against all odds, they were winning. What about your family? She asked. They teach you anything useful? Caleb took a drink before answering. My father taught me how to read land. My mother taught me that loving something doesn't mean it won't leave you. His voice was matter-of-fact, but there was old pain underneath. They died when I was 16. Fever took them both inside a week. I'm sorry. Long time ago. Still. They sat in silence, the kind that felt comfortable instead of awkward. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. Can I ask you something? Caleb said. Sure. Why didn't you fight harder? When Pritchard first showed up with the debt, you could have taken it to court, challenged it. Eliza stared out at the dark land. Because I was scared and alone, and I didn't think I could win. She took the bottle, drank. Men like Pritchard, they count on that, on people being too tired or too scared to fight back. You're not scared anymore. I am, just less alone. The words sat between them, honest and raw. Caleb looked at her, and in the dim porch light, his expression was something she couldn't quite name. Eliza. Whatever he was going to say got cut off by the sound of hooves. They both stood, Caleb's hand going to the pistol he'd started wearing. A rider approached fast, sliding to a stop in the yard. It was Thompson, who owned the property to the east. His face was tight with worry. Sorry to bother you folks so late, he said, breathing hard. But we got trouble. Rustlers hit my herd tonight, took near 20 head. Sheriff's useless. I need help tracking them. Eliza exchanged a look with Caleb. How many rustlers? 3, maybe 4. They're heading toward the canyon country. I'll go, Caleb said. No, Eliza said. We both go. Eliza, it's my land too, and Thompson helped us when my father died. We owe him. Thompson looked between them. I'd be grateful for the help, but it could get rough. We're not strangers to rough, Eliza said. She was already moving toward the barn. Give us 10 minutes. They saddled horses in tense silence, checking weapons, preparing for something neither one wanted, but both understood. This was part of life out here, helping neighbors because someday you'd need the help returned. Caleb pulled her aside before they mounted. You stay back if shooting starts. Promise me. I don't make promises I can't keep. Eliza, I can shoot, Caleb, better than you probably, and I'm not hiding while other people do the dangerous work. He looked like he wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. Thompson was already riding out. They caught up with 2 more neighbors, Martinez from the south and old Bill Crawford, who was too stubborn to stay home despite his age. 5 of them total, tracking through the dark, following signs that were getting harder to read. The rustlers had a head start, but they were moving cattle, which meant slow. By dawn, they'd closed the gap. The thieves had holed up in a narrow canyon, probably planning to wait out the day and move again at night. Bad tactical choice. They'd trapped themselves. Martinez approached from the south while Caleb and Thompson circled north. Eliza and Crawford took the high ground, rifles ready. The plan was simple: show force, offer a chance to surrender, hope they took it. They didn't. The first shot came from the canyon, wild and panicked. Crawford returned fire, and then it was chaos. Eliza sighted down her rifle, looking for targets that weren't cattle, breathing steady despite her heart trying to punch through her ribs. She saw movement, a man running for cover, fired. The bullet hit Rock inches from his head, and he went down flat. Good enough. The fight lasted maybe 3 minutes, but felt like hours. When it ended, 2 rustlers were wounded, one was running on foot, and the fourth had his hands up, surrendering. Nobody on their side was hurt, though Thompson had a graze on his arm that would need tending. They rounded up the cattle, tied up the prisoners, and started the long ride back. By the time they reached Thompson's ranch, the sun was high and brutal, and Eliza was exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. "I owe you," Thompson said, shaking Caleb's hand, then Eliza's. "Won't forget this." "Just do the same if we need it," Eliza said. On the ride home, Caleb kept looking at her. "What?" she finally asked. "You're a hell of a shot." "Told you." "Yeah, you did." He smiled, small but real. "Remind me not to make you angry." "Too late. I'm always angry about something." He laughed, and the sound was good, human, breaking through the tension of the night. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd stood together when it mattered, learning they made a decent team. Back at the ranch, they took care of the horses first, then themselves. Eliza cleaned up, changed clothes, and found Caleb at the well, washing blood off his hands. Not his blood, but blood all the same. "You all right?" she asked. "Yeah. You?" "Tired, but all right." He dried his hands on his pants, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You could have been hurt tonight." "So could you." "That's different." "How?" "Because—" He stopped, jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. "Because I knew what I was getting into when I made this deal. Fighting rustlers wasn't part of it. Life out here, it's all part of it. You know that." "I do. I just—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm supposed to help you keep the ranch, not get you killed. I'm not going to die because I helped a neighbor. You don't know that. Neither do you." She stepped closer, tired of the distance they kept trying to maintain. "Caleb, we're in this together. That means all of it. The work, the risk, everything. You don't get to protect me from life." "I can try." "Why?" The question hung there, simple and impossible. Why did he care so much? Why did he keep putting himself between her and danger? Why couldn't they just stick to the arrangement they'd made? "Because," he said quietly, "you matter." And somewhere along the way, this stopped being business. The admission landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading. Eliza's throat went tight. "Caleb, I know what we said. I know the deal. I'm not asking to change it." He looked at her, honest and vulnerable in ways that made her chest ache. "But I can't pretend anymore that this is just convenience. Not after everything." She should step back, should remind him about boundaries and agreements and keeping things simple. Should do anything except what she did, which was close the last bit of distance between them and kiss him. He froze for a second, surprised, then kissed her back. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the calluses, and she felt something inside her shift and settle, like finding level ground after climbing for miles. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Eliza rested her forehead against his. "This is complicated," she said. "Yeah. We're supposed to keep this simple." "I know. I'm terrible at simple." He laughed softly. "I've noticed." They stood there while the sun climbed higher, while the well water flowed and cattle grazed and the desert breathed around them. The ranch they were fighting for, the life they were building. It was different now. Less defined by contracts and more by choice. Eventually they'd have to talk about what this meant, about where they went from here. But for now, standing in the dirt with possibility hanging between them like morning light, simple or not, didn't matter. They were in it together. That was enough. The kiss changed things in ways neither of them wanted to admit out loud. They didn't talk about it the next day or the day after that. Just went back to work like nothing had shifted, except everything had. Caleb's hand would linger on hers when passing tools. Eliza would catch herself watching him when he wasn't looking. Small things that added up to something neither of them knew how to handle. 3 months into their arrangement, they'd made 4 payments to Pritchard without missing a deadline. The silver kept producing, not abundantly, but enough. The well transformed the ranch. Grass was growing again, cattle gaining weight, the land remembering what it used to be. They bought 6 young steers at auction, investing back into the herd like Eliza had wanted. Things were working. That should have been enough to keep them satisfied. But success brought its own problems, the kind that wore expensive suits and noticed when struggling ranches suddenly stopped struggling. Pritchard showed up unannounced on a Tuesday morning, not for a payment, but for what he called a courtesy visit. Eliza saw the carriage coming and felt her stomach drop. "He's early," she said. Caleb looked up from the fence he was mending. 3 weeks early. That's not a good sign. They met Pritchard in the yard, presenting a united front. He climbed down from his carriage with that politician's smile that never reached his eyes, looking around the property with obvious interest. "Mrs. Rourke, Mr. Rourke, beautiful morning." "What do you want, Pritchard?" Eliza didn't bother with pleasantries. "Direct as always, I appreciate that." He gestured around them. "I've been hearing interesting things. Your ranch seems to be recovering quite well. New cattle, repaired fences, and unless my sources are mistaken, you've struck water. So? So I'm curious how a ranch that was barely surviving 4 months ago is suddenly thriving. Your payments arrive on time, in cash. You're rebuilding your herd. Either you're very lucky or there's something you haven't shared with me." Caleb stepped forward slightly, positioning himself between Pritchard and Eliza. "We're working hard, that's all." Hard work doesn't usually translate to this kind of turnaround this quickly. Pritchard's eyes were sharp, calculating. "There's silver on this land, isn't there? That's what your father suspected. That's why I gave him the loan in the first place." "My father dug for silver and found nothing," Eliza said. "You know that." "I know he stopped digging. Doesn't mean it isn't there." "You want to renegotiate the terms?" Caleb asked, his voice flat. "I want transparency. If there's mineral wealth on this property, I have a right to know. The loan agreement includes clauses about disclosure of assets." "We've disclosed everything we're required to," Eliza said. "You'll get your money, same as we agreed. What we do with our land beyond that is our business." Pritchard's smile tightened. "Be careful, Mrs. Rourke. This town runs on trust. Break that trust, and you'll find life gets considerably harder." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reminder. I'll be watching your progress with great interest." He climbed back into his carriage, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. "See you next month." They watched him leave, neither speaking until the dust settled. "He knows," Eliza said quietly. "Suspects. Doesn't know. He'll dig until he finds proof. Then what?" "Then we deal with it." Caleb turned to her, his expression serious. "But we need to be smarter. No more selling ore locally. We take it further, different dealers each time. And we work the mine only at night. That's going to slow production. Rather slow than have Pritchard figure it out and find some legal way to take it from us." Eliza wanted to argue, but he was right. They'd gotten comfortable, maybe even a little cocky. Time to remember they were still fighting for survival, just with better weapons now. That night they worked the mine by lamplight, hauling ore in careful silence. The work was harder in the dark, more dangerous. Eliza slipped once, caught herself on the shaft wall, came away with scraped palms. "You all right?" Caleb was there immediately, checking her hands. "Fine. Just clumsy." "We should stop. This is too risky. We need the ore." "Not if you break your neck getting it." She pulled her hands back, irritated. "Stop treating me like I'm fragile. I've worked this ranch my whole life. I know the risks." That was before someone was actively looking for reasons to take it from you. "Pritchard's always been looking. This isn't new." "It is, though. Before you were failing, he could afford to wait. Now you're succeeding, and that makes you a threat. Men like him don't like threats." Eliza sat down on a rock, tired suddenly. Not just physically, but mentally. The constant vigilance, the endless scrambling to stay ahead, the weight of knowing one mistake could cost them everything. It was exhausting. "Sometimes I think about just selling," she said quietly. taking whatever I can get and walking away, starting over somewhere easier. Caleb sat beside her. You don't mean that. Don't I? This land has cost me everything. My father, my childhood, now every waking moment. For what? Dust and debt and fighting battles that never end? For home. For something that's yours that nobody gave you. Maybe that's not enough anymore. He was quiet for a long moment. If you want to sell, I'll help you. We'll pay off Pritchard, split what's left, and you can go wherever you want. Just like that? Just like that. This is your land, Eliza. Your choice. I'm here because you let me be, but I won't trap you into staying somewhere you don't want to be. She looked at him in the lamplight, this man who'd rearranged his entire life to help save hers, and felt something crack open inside her chest. What would you do? If I sold? Find another ranch. Keep moving, like I was before. That's not a life. It's the life I know. You could have more. You deserve more. He smiled, sad and small. So do you. Question is, what do you actually want? What did she want? A month ago, the answer would have been simple. Keep the ranch, survive, prove she could do what her father couldn't. But now, sitting in the dark with scraped hands and a future that felt less certain than ever, she wasn't sure. I want to stop being scared, she said finally. I want to wake up one morning and not immediately think about what could go wrong. I want to build something that doesn't feel like it's held together with wire and prayers. We're getting there. Are we? Or are we just delaying the inevitable? Caleb reached over, took her hand, his thumb traced over her scraped palm, gentle. Nothing's inevitable except what we let be. You've fought too hard to quit now. Maybe fighting is the problem. Maybe. Or maybe you're just tired. He stood, pulling her up with him. Come on. We're done for tonight. Rest first, decide later. They packed up the tools and headed back to the house. At the porch, Caleb hesitated. Eliza. Yeah? For what it's worth, I think you staying is the right choice. But that's selfish. I like working this land. He stopped, reconsidered. I like the life we're building here, even when it's hard. Even when I'm talking about quitting? Especially then, means you're human. She wanted to kiss him again, but something held her back. Fear, maybe, of making this more complicated than it already was. So she just nodded and went inside, leaving him standing in the dark. Sleep didn't come easy. She lay awake listening to night sounds, thinking about choices and consequences, and what it meant to fight for something when you weren't entirely sure why you were fighting anymore. Morning brought clarity in the form of Thompson riding up with news that pushed everything else aside. Rustlers hit Martinez last night, he said, out of breath. Took near his whole herd, 30 head. Eliza felt ice in her stomach. Same ones from before? Don't know. Sheriff's still useless. Martinez is talking about forming a group, going after them ourselves. That's vigilante justice. That's survival. We can't afford to keep losing stock. Insurance doesn't cover rustling, and the law won't help. What choice do we have? Caleb appeared from the barn, reading the situation immediately. How many ranchers are willing to ride? Martinez, me, the Crawford boys, maybe 6 others. We need numbers if we're going to do this right. I'll go, Caleb said. Me too, Eliza added. Thompson looked uncomfortable. Eliza, this could get bad. Real bad. Martinez is talking about more than just recovering cattle. What's he talking about? Making sure it doesn't happen again, permanently. The implication hung heavy, not just catching thieves, but ending them. Eliza had shot at rustlers before, but that was defense. This was something else. When? Caleb asked. Tomorrow at dawn. Martinez's ranch. Bring weapons and supplies for 3 days. After Thompson left, Eliza and Caleb stood in the yard, both thinking the same thing neither wanted to say. You don't have to go, Caleb said. Neither do you. Yeah, I do. These are our neighbors. They helped us. We helped them. Then we both go. Eliza's, don't. We already had this argument. I'm not staying behind while you ride into danger. He looked like he wanted to push back, but he knew her well enough by now to recognize a losing battle. All right, but you follow my lead, and if shooting starts, you find cover. Deal? Deal. They spent the rest of the day preparing, checking weapons, packing supplies, making arrangements for the ranch in case they didn't come back. That last part went unspoken, but they both knew it was possible. Rustlers who'd hit 3 ranches in 2 months weren't going to surrender easy. That night, Caleb moved from the barn to the house. Not into her bedroom, but into the spare room her father used to use. It felt right somehow, having him closer, especially with uncertainty looming. They sat at the kitchen table after dark, checking ammunition, not talking much. "You scared?" Eliza asked finally. "Yeah. You?" "Terrified." "Good. Means you're smart." She smiled despite herself. "When did you get so wise?" "About the same time I got too old to think I was invincible." He set down the rifle he was cleaning. "I've been in situations like this before. Colorado, after I lost the ranch. Got involved with some men who were settling scores. It went bad fast." "How bad?" 2 men died. Could have been 3, but I got lucky." His eyes were distant, remembering. "That's when I started moving. Figured if I stayed put, the past would catch up." "Is that why you're really here? Still running?" "Maybe. Or maybe I was looking for a reason to stop." He looked at her then, direct and honest. "Think I found one." Eliza's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this for weeks, ever since that first kiss, never quite saying what they both felt. Now it was out there, fragile and real. "Caleb, You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know, in case tomorrow goes sideways." "Don't talk like that." "Have to. We both do." He reached across the table, took her hand. "If something happens to me, you keep fighting. Keep this place. Don't let Pritchard or anyone else take it." "Nothing's going to happen." "But if it does, I'll burn the whole damn thing down before I let Pritchard have it." She squeezed his hand. "And if something happens to me, you get out. Take what money's left and go somewhere new. Start over properly." "Eliza, promise me." He didn't want to. She could see it in his face. But finally he nodded. "I promise." They sat there holding hands across the table while lamplight flickered and the house settled around them, 2 people making promises about futures they might not have, hoping they wouldn't need to keep them. Eventually, Eliza stood. "I should sleep. Early start tomorrow." Caleb stood too. For a moment they just looked at each other, the space between them charged with everything unspoken. Then Eliza closed the distance and kissed him, softer than the first time, but somehow more intense. His arms came around her, solid and steady, and she let herself sink into it. When they broke apart, she rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Come back tomorrow," she said quietly. "You too." "I mean it. We've got too much unfinished here." "Yeah, we do." She pulled back, looked up at him. "After this is done, after we deal with the rustlers and Pritchard and everything else, we should talk, really talk, about what this is." "I'd like that." She kissed him once more, quick and sweet, then headed to her room before she could change her mind about keeping things separate. Some boundaries needed to hold, at least until they knew if they had a future to plan for. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of dreams she couldn't quite remember. When dawn broke gray and cold, she was already awake, dressed, ready. Caleb met her in the kitchen. They ate in silence, checked their gear one last time, and rode out as the sun cleared the horizon. Martinez's ranch was chaos when they arrived. 11 riders total, all armed, all looking grim. Martinez himself was a compact man in his 40s with eyes that had seen too much hardship and a jawline that said he was done taking it. "Glad you came," he said, shaking Caleb's hand, nodding to Eliza. "We've got a tracker who says the rustlers are holed up in the canyon country, same as before. Probably think we won't come after them this time." "What's the plan?" Thompson asked. "We ride in hard, surround them, and give them one chance to surrender. They don't take it, we take them down." One of the Crawford boys, the younger one, looked nervous. "You talking about killing them?" "I'm talking about protecting what's ours, however that needs to happen." The words settled heavy. This wasn't law enforcement. This was frontier justice, the kind that usually ended bloody. They rode out in a group, following the tracker who read signs in the dirt like some people read books. The trail led them deeper into rough country, away from civilization, into places where nobody would hear shots or ask questions. By midday, they'd found the rustlers' camp, a makeshift setup in a box canyon with stolen cattle penned in a makeshift corral. 4 men, all armed, not expecting company. Martinez split them into groups. Caleb and Eliza went with Thompson, circling to the east. The plan was to close in simultaneously, cut off escape routes. Eliza's heart hammered as they moved into position. This was different from defending against an attack. This was offense, aggressive, the kind that could turn into slaughter if they weren't careful. They were almost in position when one of the rustlers spotted movement. He shouted a warning and everything went to hell. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions. Eliza dove behind a boulder, rifle up, looking for targets. Caleb was beside her, firing controlled shots, trying to pin the rustlers down without killing them outright. One of the thieves made a run for the horses. Thompson shot him in the leg, dropping him. Another returned fire wildly, bullets spanging off rock. Eliza sighted on him, hesitated for just a second, then fired. Hit him in the shoulder. He went down, screaming. The fight lasted maybe 5 minutes. When it ended, 2 rustlers were wounded. One was dead, shot by Martinez, and the 4th had his hands up, surrendering. Eliza's hand shook as she lowered her rifle. She'd shot a man. Not killed him, but the blood was real, the screaming was real, and the weight of it settled in her gut like lead. Caleb touched her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. They rounded up the wounded, tied them up, recovered the cattle. The dead rustler they left where he fell. Nobody said it out loud, but the message was clear. This is what happens when you steal from us. The ride back was quiet. Nobody celebrated. Martinez looked satisfied but not happy. Thompson kept checking his rifle like he needed something to do with his hands. The Crawford boys didn't talk at all. When they finally made it back to Martinez's ranch, dividing up the recovered cattle, Eliza felt numb. She'd defended herself before, but this felt different, premeditated, calculated, necessary, maybe, but it left a taste in her mouth she couldn't wash out. "You did good," Caleb said as they rode home. "I shot a man." "You defended your livelihood. There's a difference." "Is there?" He didn't answer right away. "Out here, sometimes the line gets blurry, but yeah, there is. You didn't go looking for violence. It found you, and you responded. Doesn't make it easier." "No, it shouldn't." They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they got home, the ranch looked the same as when they'd left. Fences still standing, cattle still grazing, the wells still flowing. But something had changed, something inside Eliza that she couldn't quite name. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch in the dark, wrapped in a blanket, trying to process everything. Caleb found her there around midnight. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her. "I keep seeing his face," Eliza said finally. "The man I shot, the way he looked when the bullet hit." "That'll fade, not completely, but enough." "You sound like you know." "I do. Colorado, the men who died. I see them sometimes in that space between awake and asleep." He stared out at the dark land. "It's the price, I guess, for surviving when others don't." "That's a hell of a price." "Yeah." They sat in silence until the cold drove them inside. Caleb followed her to the kitchen, where she made coffee neither of them really wanted, but both needed the ritual of making. "We should talk," Caleb said. "Like you said before, about what this is." Eliza poured coffee, hands steadier now. "All right, you go first." "I love you." The words landed simple and direct, no flourish, just truth. Eliza set down the coffee pot, staring at him. "That wasn't what I expected you to say?" "I know, but I'm tired of dancing around it. I love you. Probably have for a while now. And this arrangement we made, the business deal, the marriage of convenience, it stopped being that for me a long time ago." "Caleb, I'm not asking you to say it back. I'm just telling you where I stand, so you know, so there's no confusion about what I'm fighting for." Eliza's throat felt tight. She'd known, on some level, that they'd crossed lines they couldn't uncross. But hearing it said out loud made it real in ways that scared her. "I don't know if I can do this," she said quietly. "Love someone. Let them matter that much. Every person I've loved has left or died, and I don't know if I can survive losing someone else." "You might not lose me." "I might. We both know the risks out here. Today proved that. So what? You just don't let anyone in? You spend your whole life alone because it's safer? Maybe. Is that really worse than the alternative? Caleb set down his coffee, frustrated. Yeah, Eliza, it is, because safe isn't living. It's just existing, and you deserve more than that. So do you. You could find someone who isn't broken and scared and fighting battles all the time. I don't want someone else. I want you. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. All of you. The strong parts and the scared parts and everything in between. I want the ranch and the fights and waking up knowing we're in this together. I want a real marriage, not a legal arrangement. Eliza felt tears threatening, angry at herself for the weakness. What if I can't give you that? Then we keep going like we are. Partners, friends, whatever you can manage. But I needed you to know the truth. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to. Oh, why? Why stay for someone who can't promise you anything? Because some things are worth the risk. He reached out, cupped her face gently. You're worth the risk. The tears spilled over then, and she hated them, hated feeling vulnerable and exposed. But Caleb just pulled her close, let her cry against his shoulder while years of grief and fear and loneliness poured out. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, she felt empty and raw, but somehow lighter. I don't know how to do this, she said. How to be someone's wife for real. How to let someone matter without waiting for them to leave. Neither do I. We figure it out as we go. That's a terrible plan. You got a better one? She laughed, wet and shaky. No. Then we go with terrible and see where it leads. Eliza looked at him, this man who'd shown up with nothing and given her everything, and made a choice. Not the safe choice, not the smart choice, but the honest one. I love you too, she said quietly. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between the fence mending and the silver and you putting your whole life into saving mine, I fell. Hard. And it scares me to death. His smile was slow and genuine. Good. We can be scared together. That's romantic. I'm not good at romantic. Neither am I. She kissed him, soft and slow, letting herself feel it without the guards up. But maybe we can figure that out too. Yeah, maybe we can. They stood in the kitchen while the coffee went cold, holding each other like anchors against an uncertain world. Outside, the desert night was vast and indifferent. Inside, two people decided to risk everything on something fragile and precious and entirely worth fighting for. When they finally pulled apart, Eliza took his hand. Stay, tonight, not in the spare room. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. They went to her room together, closing the door on pretense and distance. What happened next was private and real. Two people choosing each other despite every reason not to, finding comfort in closeness and honesty, and the simple human need to not be alone. Morning came eventually, sunlight through thin curtains, the sounds of the ranch waking up. Eliza woke to find Caleb already awake, watching her. What? She asked, self-conscious. Nothing. Just thinking how different everything is from 4 months ago. Better different or worse different? Definitely better. He kissed her forehead. Even with Pritchard and rustlers and everything else trying to kill us. Low bar for better. I'll take what I can get. They got up, got dressed, started the day like always. But it wasn't like always. Small things were different. The way he touched her back passing in the hallway, the way she smiled when he brought coffee, the sense that they were building something together instead of just surviving side by side. The silver kept producing. The herd kept growing. Payments to Pritchard kept arriving on time. They worked the mine at night now, careful and cautious, hiding their success behind careful mediocrity. But Pritchard was persistent. 2 weeks after the rustler incident, he showed up again, this time with a surveyor. What's this? Eliza demanded. Just doing due diligence. I have a right to survey property I hold loans against, making sure the land value supports the debt. You never cared about land value before. Times change, markets fluctuate. I'm protecting my investment. Pritchard smiled that oily smile. Unless you have something to hide. Caleb stepped forward. Survey all you want. You'll find dirt and rock, same as always. The surveyor spent 3 days mapping the property, taking measurements, testing soil. They watched him like hawks, making sure he didn't find the mine entrance they'd carefully concealed. When he finally left, he had pages of notes but no evidence of silver. Pritchard looked disappointed when he reviewed the report. Satisfied? Eliza asked. For now. But I'll be watching, Mrs. Rourke. Success this sudden always has a source. After he left, Eliza and Caleb stood in the yard, both knowing they'd dodged a bullet, but wondering how long their luck would hold. We need to finish this, Eliza said. Pay off the debt completely. Get him off our backs for good. We're 8 months in, still owe near $2,000. The silver's producing more now. We push harder, work longer. We could have it in 6 months. That's ambitious. So is everything we've done. She looked at him. I'm tired of living under Pritchard's thumb. Let's end it. Caleb nodded slowly. All right. 6 months. We work the mine hard, sell everything we can spare, and clear this debt. Then it's really ours. Then it's really ours, she agreed. They shook on it like business partners, then kissed like something more, and got back to work building a future that was finally starting to feel possible. 6 months became their mantra, their finish line, the light at the end of a tunnel that had been dark for far too long. They worked like people possessed, pushing themselves past exhaustion into something that resembled madness. The mine consumed their nights, the ranch their days, and sleep became something they squeezed in when their bodies simply refused to continue. 2 weeks into their aggressive push, Eliza nearly collapsed while hauling ore. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground, his face tight with worry. That's it. We're done for tonight. We need 3 more loads. We need you alive more. He half carried her out of the shaft, into the cool night air. You're running yourself into the ground. So are you. I'm bigger, can take more. That's not how bodies work. But she didn't fight him when he led her back to the house. Didn't argue when he made her sit while he heated soup left over from 2 days ago. They ate in silence, both too tired for conversation. Eliza's hand shook holding the spoon, and she hated the weakness, hated that her body was failing when her mind insisted she could push through. We can't keep this pace, Caleb said finally. We have to. 6 months, remember? 6 months doesn't matter if we kill ourselves getting there. He set down his bowl. We need to be smarter. Work sustainable hours. Take rest days. Rest days are lost money. Dead ranchers don't spend money. She wanted to snap at him, but exhaustion dulled her edges. What do you suggest? 4 nights a week at the mine instead of 7. Alternate who works it so we're not both wrecked. And 1 full day off every week. No ranch work, no mine, just rest. That'll add months to the timeline. Maybe. Or maybe we'll work more efficiently when we're not half dead. He reached across the table, took her hand. I want us to win, Eliza. But I want us to survive the winning. She looked at their joined hands, calloused and scarred, evidence of everything they'd endured together. He was right, damn him. Burning out wouldn't help anyone. Fine, 4 nights, but we push hard those 4 nights, no holding back. Agreed. The new schedule helped, though admitting it annoyed her. They were still exhausted, still working brutal hours, but the edge of desperation dulled slightly. On their rest days, they'd ride the property checking fences, or sit on the porch watching sunset, or just exist in the same space without demands hanging over them. It was during one of those rest days, 3 months into their 6-month push, that the telegram arrived. A writer brought it from town, looking apologetic. Eliza opened it with shaking hands, a sense of dread settling in her gut before she even read the words. Her Aunt Margaret was dying. Back in Missouri, the only family Eliza had left, asking to see her one last time. I have to go, she said quietly, staring at the telegram. Caleb read over her shoulder. How long? Week there by train, week back. However long in between. She did the math, feeling sick. 3 weeks minimum, maybe 4. That's 2 payments we'll miss. I know. They stood there in the yard, the telegram fluttering in the breeze, both understanding what this meant. Missing payments would give Pritchard exactly the leverage he'd been waiting for. He could call the entire loan due, take the ranch, and they'd have no legal recourse. Don't go, Caleb said. Eliza looked at him, startled. She's dying. And this ranch is living. You walk away now, you'll lose everything. She raised me when my mother died. I owe her. You don't owe her the ranch. You don't owe her your future. His voice was hard, practical. People die, Eliza. You can't save them, but you can save this. The words hit like a slap. She stepped back, anger flaring hot and sudden. You want me to let my aunt die alone so I can protect dirt and cattle? I want you to make the smart choice. The smart choice? The smart choice is to be there for family when they need you. Family that hasn't visited once since your father died? Family that didn't help when you were drowning in debt? He gestured at the land around them. This is your family now, this ranch, this life we're building. Don't throw it away for someone who disappeared when you needed them most. That's not fair. It's honest. Eliza wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, wanted him to be wrong. But part of her knew he wasn't. Her aunt had been absent through the worst of it, sending letters of sympathy but no actual help. Still, that didn't erase years of kindness, of being taken in when she was grieving and lost. I'm going, she said quietly. I'll miss the payments, and Pritchard will probably use it to take everything, but I'm going, because that's who I am. I don't abandon people when they're dying, even for land. Caleb's jaw tightened. Then you're a fool. Maybe, but I'm a fool who can live with herself. And when you come back to nothing, can you live with that too? She didn't answer, just turned and walked into the house, leaving him standing in the yard with a telegram that felt like a death sentence for more than just her aunt. That night they didn't speak. Eliza packed a small bag, counting out money for the train, trying not to think about what she was risking. Caleb worked the mine alone, angry and efficient, hauling ore with mechanical determination. By morning, the silence between them was thick enough to cut. Eliza loaded her bag onto the wagon, ready for the ride to town and the train station beyond. Caleb appeared as she was checking the harness, his face unreadable. I'll keep working the mine, he said. Sell what I can. Make one payment for sure, maybe both if the ore holds. You don't have to. I know, but this ranch matters to me too, even if you're willing to lose it for principle. The words stung, but she didn't fire back. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just come back fast. She wanted to say something else, something that would bridge the gap between them, but the words wouldn't come. So she just climbed onto the wagon and drove away, feeling the weight of his stare on her back until distance erased it. The train ride to Missouri was long and miserable. Eliza spent it staring out windows at passing landscape, second-guessing every decision. Was Caleb right? Was she throwing away everything for a woman who'd barely been present in her life these last years? But every time she thought about turning back, she remembered her aunt's hands braiding her hair after her mother's funeral, remembered being told she was strong enough to survive anything, remembered kindness when the world felt cruel. Family mattered, even when it was inconvenient. Street. Louise was gray and cold, nothing like Arizona. Her aunt's house was smaller than she remembered, worn by time and neglect. A neighbor lady answered the door, her expression sympathetic. She's upstairs. Doesn't have long now. I'm glad you made it. Eliza climbed stairs that creaked under her boots, each step feeling heavier than the last. The room at the top was dim, curtains drawn, smelling of sickness and approaching death. Her aunt looked nothing like the sturdy woman who'd raised her. Margaret Carter was a skeleton draped in loose skin, breathing shallow, eyes closed. Eliza sat in the chair beside the bed, taking a hand that felt like bird bones. Aunt Margaret? It's Eliza. The eyes opened, cloudy but aware. Eliza, you came. Of course I came. Foolish girl, should have stayed with your ranch. But there was affection in the words, not criticism. The ranch will keep. Will it? Margaret's grip tightened weakly. I heard about your father, about the debt. I wanted to help, but I've got nothing to give. This house is mortgaged, and I'm dying poor as I lived. I'm not here for money. I know. That's why I love you. She coughed, wet and painful. Tell me about the ranch. Is it still standing? So Eliza talked about the drought and the debt, about Caleb showing up like some answer to a question she hadn't asked, about finding silver and water against impossible odds. She talked about fighting rustlers and bankers, about learning to hope again when hope seemed stupid. Margaret listened, squeezing Eliza's hand whenever the story got particularly rough, her breathing growing more labored as the day wore on. This man, Caleb, you love him? Yes. He love you? He says so. Then hold on to that. Love's rarer than silver. Margaret's eyes drifted closed. I should have married, should have taken risks instead of playing it safe, ended up alone anyway. You're not alone now. No, thank you for that. Her breathing changed, rougher. Eliza, listen. In the desk downstairs, there's a lockbox. Keys under the blotter. Take what's in it. Aunt Margaret, don't argue with a dying woman. Take it. Use it for the ranch. It's not much, but it's yours now. Eliza wanted to protest, but Margaret's eyes had closed again, and her breathing settled into a rhythm that sounded like sleep. She sat there holding her aunt's hand while afternoon faded to evening, while the neighbor brought weak tea and kind words, while the house settled into the quiet of waiting. Margaret died just after midnight, slipping away so gently Eliza almost missed it. One breath, then nothing. Just absence where presence had been. The neighbor helped with arrangements. A simple funeral, barely attended, Margaret's friends mostly gone or dead themselves. Eliza stood in a cold cemetery under gray skies, watching a coffin lowered into frozen ground, and felt the finality of it settle in her bones. After everything was done, she remembered the lockbox. Found it in the desk as promised, opened it with the key her aunt had mentioned. Inside was $600 in cash and a letter. The letter was short, written in Margaret's shaky handwriting. Eliza, this is everything I have. I know it's not enough to save your ranch, but maybe it'll help. I'm sorry I wasn't there when your father died. I was scared and sick and useless. But I'm proud of you. Proud of your strength and your stubbornness and the fact that you came when I called, even knowing what it might cost. That's character. Hold on to it. And hold on to that man if he's worth having. Life's too short for loneliness. Love, Aunt Margaret. Eliza sat in the empty house and cried for the first time since arriving. Not just for her aunt, but for her father, for years of struggle, for the ranch she might have already lost, for the man she'd left behind with angry words between them. When the tears finally stopped, she counted the money again. $600. Not enough to clear the debt, but enough to make 2 payments and buy time. Maybe enough to matter. She caught the first train west the next morning, the money sewn into the lining of her coat, her aunt's letter folded in her pocket. The ride back felt longer than the ride out, every mile stretching like taffy, worry gnawing at her gut. What if Pritchard had already foreclosed? What if Caleb had left, tired of fighting a losing battle? What if she came home to nothing? The train pulled into the station 4 days after Margaret's funeral. Eliza hired a horse, not bothering with a wagon, and rode hard for the ranch. The sun was setting when she crested the final ridge and saw the property spread below. The ranch was still there, fences standing, cattle grazing, smoke rising from the chimney. Relief hit so hard she had to stop and breathe through it. She rode in slowly, not sure what she'd find. Caleb appeared from the barn, stopping short when he saw her. For a moment they just stared at each other across the yard, all the words they hadn't said hanging heavy between them. Then Eliza dismounted and walked to him, closing the distance with deliberate steps. I'm sorry, she said, for leaving angry, for making you feel like the ranch didn't matter. I'm sorry, too, for being an ass about your aunt, for making it seem like money mattered more than family. Did you make the payments? One of them. The mine's producing slower than I hoped. I've got most of the second payment, but we're short about $80. Eliza pulled out the envelope with her aunt's money. Will $600 help? His eyes widened. Where'd you get that? My aunt left it for me, for the ranch. Eliza, it's enough, right? To cover what we're short and buy us more time? Yeah, it's enough. He took the money, counted it, looked at her with something like wonder. Your aunt did that for you? For us? She said to hold on to you if you're worth having. Eliza's throat tightened. Are you? Worth having? I don't know. Am I? Instead of answering, she kissed him, fierce and desperate and full of all the fear she'd carried across states and back. His arms came around her, lifting her off the ground, and she held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb set her down gently. I missed you, he said. I was only gone 2 weeks. Longest 2 weeks of my life. Mine, too. She looked past him at the ranch, at everything they'd fought to keep. Did Pritchard come around? 3 times. Got more aggressive each visit. Last time he implied he'd call the loan due if we missed another payment. Then we don't miss. We take my aunt's money, make the payments, and keep pushing. We're at 11 months now, still owe about $1,800. So we have 7 months left on our timeline. We can do it. Caleb studied her face, looking for something. You sure about this? About staying? About fighting? You could take that money and go somewhere easier. I could, but I'm not going to. She took his hand. This is home, Caleb. You're home. I'm done running from hard things. Even when hard things might kill you? Especially then. He smiled, small but real. You're crazy. Probably. You staying anyway? Yeah, I'm staying. They went inside together, back to the life they'd built. And if the weight hadn't lifted completely, at least it felt more bearable shared between 2 people instead of 1. The next 7 months were brutal but different than before. They'd found a rhythm, learned each other's limits, understood when to push and when to rest. The mine kept producing, not abundantly but steady. The cattle herd grew to 23 head, then 30. The land responded to water and care, grass returning in patches that would eventually become pasture. Pritchard kept circling, kept showing up with questions and implications, but they met every payment on time and in full. Each month he looked more frustrated, like a predator watching prey slip away. On the 14th month, Caleb brought in a particularly rich haul of ore from the mine. They stayed up all night processing it, sorting quality from waste, and when dawn broke they had enough silver to clear the remaining debt completely. Eliza sat at the kitchen table staring at the metal that represented freedom, not quite believing it was real. We did it, she said quietly. Yeah, we did. So now what? Now we ride into town, pay off Pritchard, and get the deed back. Just like that? Just like that. They dressed carefully, both wearing their best clothes, which weren't much but better than work gear. The ride to town felt surreal, like moving through a dream where the rules didn't quite make sense. Pritchard's bank was busy when they arrived, customers conducting ordinary business, unaware they were about to witness something extraordinary. Eliza walked up to his desk with Caleb beside her, setting down a leather pouch heavy with cash and silver credit notes. Mr. Pritchard, we're here to settle the loan, in full. Pritchard's smile faltered. He opened the pouch, counted the contents twice, his face going through several expressions: surprise, calculation, frustration. This clears the debt, he said finally. Then we'll take the deed. Of course. Just let me retrieve it from the vault. He disappeared into the back, taking longer than necessary, probably hoping to find some loophole or error. But the numbers were right, the money real, and when he returned with the deed, his hands shook slightly, handing it over. Eliza took the papers, her own hand steadier than they'd been in months. The deed to her father's ranch, clear and free, no bank holding leverage. Pleasure doing business with you, she said, her voice cool. Pritchard's expression was sour. I suppose congratulations are in order, though I have to wonder how exactly you managed this turnaround. Hard work and good fortune. Like you always say, America rewards those who persevere. Indeed. He didn't look like he believed it. If you ever need banking services in the future, we won't. Eliza folded the deed carefully, tucking it inside her coat. Good day, Mr. Pritchard. They walked out into sunshine that felt brighter than it had any right to be. Eliza made it to the horses before her legs went weak. Caleb caught her elbow, steadying her. You all right? Yeah, it's really over. The debt, Pritchard, all of it. It's over. She looked at him, this man who'd saved her life in every way that mattered, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not the desperate love of survival, but something deeper and more solid. What do we do now? She asked. Whatever we want. It's our land, our future. He took her hand. What do you want to do? Eliza thought about her father, about the ranch he'd died trying to save, about all the people who doubted she could hold on to it. Thought about Margaret's letter and choosing love over loneliness. Thought about the mine and the cattle and the well that had changed everything. I want to build, she said, Really build. Expand the herd, work the mine properly. Turn this ranch into something that lasts. I want to prove everyone wrong who thought I'd fail. That's a lot of work. You scared? Terrified. But I'm in anyway. They rode home slowly, savoring the feeling of freedom, of possibility, of futures that were finally theirs to shape. When they reached the ranch, Eliza stood in the yard looking at everything with new eyes. This was hers, really hers. No one could take it now. That night they celebrated with whiskey Thompson had given them months ago, sitting on the porch watching stars emerge one by one. "I've been thinking," Caleb said. "Dangerous." "Probably. But hear me out." He turned to face her. "This marriage of ours, it started as paper, convenience, but it's not that anymore." "No, it's not. So I was thinking maybe we should make it official, real, the way it should have been from the start." Eliza's heart kicked. "You want to get married again?" "I want to marry you properly, with people there and vows we mean, and a celebration that's about more than survival." "We're already married." "Legally. I'm talking about everything else. The standing in front of people and claiming each other. The building a life intentionally instead of desperately." He took her hand. "I'm talking about choosing this. Choosing us." She looked at their joined hands, remembering the first time he'd offered this deal, how desperate and scared she'd been, how impossible the future had seemed. Everything had changed since then. She'd changed. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's do it properly." His smile was brilliant. "Yeah? Yeah. Small, though. Just neighbors and people who matter. I can work with small." They planned it for spring, when the land would be green and the weather mild. Sent word to the neighbors who'd helped them survive, to Johnson and Thompson and Martinez and the others who'd stood with them when it mattered. The ceremony was simple, held in the yard under clear sky, with a different preacher than the first time, one who knew their story and understood what they were celebrating. Eliza wore a dress she'd bought in town, nothing fancy but clean and new. Caleb wore a suit that fit him awkwardly but made him look like someone trying, which was all that mattered. When the preacher asked if they took each other, this time the yes meant everything. They kissed while their neighbors cheered, sealed something that had been growing for months, made permanent what had started as temporary. The celebration afterward was loud and joyful, whiskey flowing, people sharing stories about drought and debt and how nobody thought they'd make it. But here they were anyway. Eliza stood in the middle of it all, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Happy. Genuinely, completely happy. Late in the evening, when most folks had gone home and the stars were thick overhead, Caleb pulled her aside. "I got you something," he said. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." He handed her a small box, worn velvet. Inside was a ring, not fancy, not expensive, but real gold with a small stone that caught lamplight. A wedding ring, the kind she'd never had. "Caleb, I know we can't really afford it, but I wanted you to have something that says this is real." She slid it on, feeling the weight of it, the promise. "It's perfect." "You sure? Because I can—" She kissed him before he could second-guess himself, right there in the yard with neighbors still lingering and whiskey still flowing and the future stretching out ahead of them like open country. When they finally went inside, closing the door on celebration and noise, it was as husband and wife for real this time. Not an arrangement, not a convenience, but a choice made twice and meant completely. The ranch was theirs. The life was theirs. Each other was theirs. And for the first time in longer than Eliza could remember, that felt like enough. The first year of real marriage was harder than either of them expected. Not the work. They'd been working themselves half to death since the beginning. But the intimacy of it, the daily negotiation of sharing space and decisions, and a life that mattered to both of them equally, that took adjustment. 3 months after the wedding, they had their first real fight. Not a disagreement, but a proper shouting match that ended with Caleb sleeping in the barn and Eliza throwing a plate against the wall hard enough to shatter it. The fight started over something stupid, whether to sell a promising young bull or keep him for breeding. But underneath it was everything they'd been too busy surviving to deal with. Control issues. Trust issues. The fact that Eliza had run this ranch alone for so long, she'd forgotten how to share decisions, and Caleb had been rootless for so long he kept waiting for permission to put down roots. "It's my ranch," Eliza had said, the words coming out sharper than she meant. "Our ranch," Caleb corrected. "Or did that wedding mean nothing?" "That's not what I—" "Isn't it? Because every time I suggest something, you act like I'm trying to take over, like I'm going to steal it out from under you. Because that's what happened to you in Colorado. Forgive me for being cautious. I'm not him, Eliza. I'm not your partner from Colorado who screwed you over. I'm your husband. Or I'm trying to be when you let me." That's when she'd thrown the plate. The next morning, she found him in the barn mucking stalls with violent efficiency. She stood in the doorway watching him work, trying to figure out how to apologize for something that felt more complicated than just anger. "We should sell the bull," she said finally. Caleb looked up, surprised. "I thought you wanted to keep him." "I do, but you're right. We need the cash more than the breeding potential. And you're right about the other thing, too. This is our ranch. I need to stop acting like it's just mine." He set down the pitchfork, wiping sweat from his face. "I'm not trying to take anything from you." "I know, but I spent so long fighting to keep this place, fighting alone, that I forgot how to let someone help, really help, not just work help." She stepped into the barn. "I'm sorry for the plate and the yelling and acting like you're the enemy when you're the only reason I still have a home. You would have found a way without me. Maybe, but it wouldn't have been this, us, and I don't want to lose that because I'm too stubborn to share." Caleb crossed to her, cupping her face gently. "I'm not going anywhere, even when you throw plates. I'll try to stop doing that. I'll try to stop pushing when you're not ready." They kissed, making up the way married people do, and that night he came back to the house. The bull got sold the following week, and the money went toward expanding the herd like Caleb had suggested. It was a small victory for compromise, but it mattered. The mine kept producing, though the vein was thinning. They could see the end of it coming, maybe another year or two before the silver ran out completely. Instead of panicking, they started planning for it. "We need to diversify," Caleb said one evening, studying the ranch books. "Can't rely on silver forever. The cattle are doing well." "They are, but we could do better. Thompson mentioned there's good money in horse breeding if you've got the stock and the patience. Horses are expensive to start. So is drilling a well. So is everything we've done." He looked at her. "What do you think?" Eliza considered it. Horses meant different work, different knowledge, different risks. But it also meant not putting all their future in one basket. "I think we look into it. Talk to people who know horses. See what it would take to start small." "Small. I like small." "Liar. You've never done anything small in your life." "Fair point." They started with 2 mares, good stock from a rancher up north who was selling off his breeding program. Cost them most of what they'd saved from 3 months of silver sales. But the mares were young and healthy with solid bloodlines. Caleb took to horses like he'd been born to them, learning quickly, asking questions of everyone who knew more than him. A year and a half after paying off Pritchard, the ranch was unrecognizable from what it had been. 47 head of cattle, 4 horses including a stallion they'd bought on credit, fences repaired and extended, a new barn going up with lumber they'd traded silver for. The well flowed strong, the land was recovering, and for the first time since her father died, Eliza could look at the property without seeing failure. That's when Pritchard made his final move. He showed up on a Tuesday with 2 men Eliza didn't recognize, both wearing suits that looked wrong on the frontier. Legal types, she guessed, and her stomach dropped. "Mrs. Rourke, Mr. Rourke, good to see you thriving." Pritchard's smile was cold. "These gentlemen are from the Territorial Mining Office. They'd like a word about mineral extraction on your property." Eliza's mouth went dry. They'd been so careful, so cautious, but somehow Pritchard had found proof. One of the men stepped forward, pulling out papers. "Ma'am, we have reports of unauthorized silver mining on this land. Mining operations require proper permits and environmental assessments. Additionally, there are questions about tax obligations on extracted minerals." "We don't know what you're talking about," Caleb said, his voice steady. "Don't you?" Pritchard's eyes gleamed. "Funny thing, I've had people watching your property. Noticed a lot of nocturnal activity near that rock face on your northern section. Noticed ore shipments leaving the area on a regular schedule. Either you're mining illegally or someone's using your land without permission. Either way, it's a problem. Those are serious accusations, Eliza said carefully. You have proof? We have sufficient evidence to warrant an investigation. The mining official looked uncomfortable, like he didn't enjoy his role, but would play it anyway. If you've been extracting minerals without proper documentation, there will be fines, potentially significant ones. How significant? That depends on how much you've extracted. But we're looking at anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000, plus seizure of any remaining mineral deposits. The number hit like a physical blow, $5,000 minimum. They didn't have that kind of money. Even if they sold everything, they'd come up short. Pritchard was practically glowing with satisfaction. Of course, this could all be resolved quietly. If you were willing to sell the property to an interested buyer who would take on the liability, assume the fines, and handle the paperwork properly. You son of a... Caleb started forward, but Eliza caught his arm. How much? She asked Pritchard. For the property? Oh, I think $7,000 would be fair. Covers your legal troubles. Gives you a bit extra to start fresh somewhere else. The ranch is worth 3 times that. The ranch with active legal problems isn't worth much at all, but $7,000 is a generous offer for a property about to be seized for environmental violations. Eliza looked at the mining officials. We need time to consult a lawyer. You have 48 hours to produce proper permits and documentation, the first official said. After that, we proceed with formal charges. They left in Pritchard's carriage, disappearing in a cloud of dust and implied threats. Eliza and Caleb stood in the yard, both trying to process what had just happened. He set us up, Caleb said quietly. Watched us, documented everything, then brought in legal muscle to force a sale. We can fight this. With what? We don't have money for lawyers. We don't have permits because we didn't know we needed them. And even if we fight, the legal fees alone will bankrupt us. Eliza felt something cold settle in her chest. They'd won against debt, against drought, against rustlers and doubt. But legal technicalities might accomplish what everything else had failed to do. There has to be a way. If there is, we've got 48 hours to find it. They rode into town that afternoon, looking for a lawyer who'd talk to them without a retainer they couldn't pay. Found one finally, an older man named Garrett who'd known her father. The problem, Garrett explained after hearing their story, is that they're technically right. Mining operations do require permits, even on private land. The territorial government has environmental regulations. You violated those regulations. We didn't know. Ignorance isn't a defense. The fines are real, and if you can't pay them, they can seize mineral rights or force a sale of the property. So we're finished. Garrett leaned back in his chair, studying them. Maybe not. There's a loophole. If you can prove the mining was small-scale, subsistence level, there's an exemption for personal use. No permits required, no fines applicable. How do we prove that? You'd need to show minimal extraction, no commercial sale, everything consumed by personal ranch operations. Basically, you'd have to lie, convincingly. Eliza and Caleb exchanged glances. We've sold ore. There are records. Ore sold under whose name? Different names. We use dealers in different towns, always cash transactions. So no direct paper trail linking you to commercial sales? No. Garrett smiled. Then as far as the law's concerned, you might have found a little silver, used some for personal expenses, and any sales were isolated incidents, small potatoes, not worth the government's time to prosecute. Will that actually work? Depends on how badly the mining office wants to pursue it, and how badly Pritchard wants this property. He pulled out a form. I can file the subsistence exemption claim. Costs $50. It'll force a hearing, give you a chance to make your case, but you'll need to be convincing. They paid the $50 with money they'd set aside for feed, and Garrett promised to file immediately. Walking back to the horses, Eliza felt sick. We're lying to the government. We're using a legal loophole. There's a difference. Is there? Caleb stopped, turning to face her. Yes. They're coming after us with technicalities and backdoor deals. We're defending ourselves the only way we can. That's not the same as what Pritchard's doing. It feels dirty. It is dirty. Welcome to the law. He took her shoulders gently. You want to keep this ranch or not? You know I do. Then we play the game. We go to that hearing, we tell our version of the truth, and we fight, same as we've been doing since day one. The hearing was set for 5 days later in the territorial courthouse. Eliza spent those days preparing, rehearsing answers with Garrett, trying to convince herself that bending the truth wasn't the same as breaking it. Pritchard showed up at the ranch twice more, each time offering to buy, each time increasing his price slightly. By the fourth visit, he was up to $9,000. "Clock's ticking, Mrs. Rourke. Take the money while it's on the table." "Not interested." "You will be. When those fines hit, when they start seizing assets, you'll wish you'd taken my offer. Or maybe you'll wish you'd left us alone." His smile was patronizing. "Admire the spirit. But spirit doesn't pay legal judgments." The courthouse was imposing, all dark wood and formal procedure. Eliza wore the same dress she'd gotten married in, Caleb his good suit. Garrett met them on the steps, looking confident in a way Eliza wished she felt. "Remember what we talked about. Small amounts, personal use, no commercial operation. You're simple ranchers who found a little silver and used it to survive. That's all." The hearing room was smaller than she expected. A territorial magistrate presided, flanked by the 2 mining officials who'd visited the ranch. Pritchard sat in the back, watching like a vulture waiting for death. The mining office presented first, laying out their case. Evidence of excavation, witness reports of nocturnal activity, records of ore moving through regional dealers. They built a picture of systematic extraction, commercial operation, environmental violation. Then it was their turn. Garrett called Eliza first. She swore her oath and sat in the witness chair, trying to keep her hands from shaking. "Mrs. Rourke, tell us about finding silver on your property." "My husband and I were expanding a well site when we hit a small vein. We extracted some ore, maybe 100 pounds total over several months." "What did you do with this ore?" "Used it to make ends meet. The ranch was struggling. We had debts. We sold a little here and there, small amounts to different dealers." "How much money are we talking about?" "Total? Maybe $800 over a year and a half." The mining official interrupted. "Our evidence suggests much larger quantities." "Your evidence is speculation," Garrett said smoothly. "Do you have bills of sale linking my clients to specific ore shipments?" "We have witness testimony of nocturnal activity, which could be anything." "Do you have documentation, signed receipts, any hard evidence of the quantities you're alleging?" The official hesitated. "No." "But the circumstantial evidence isn't enough to prove commercial operation." Garrett turned back to Eliza. "Did you operate a commercial mine?" "No." "Did you employ workers or use industrial equipment?" "No." "Would you characterize your extraction as subsistence level?" "Yes. We found enough to help survive a rough period. That's all." It went on for 2 hours, questions and answers, implications and denials. Caleb testified next, backing up Eliza's story, playing the role of struggling rancher who got lucky once and used it to stay afloat. Finally, the magistrate called a recess to review evidence. Eliza and Caleb waited outside, both exhausted from maintaining lies that felt like truth because they were built on it. "Think it worked?" Eliza asked. "Don't know. Garrett seems confident." "Garrett gets paid either way." They waited in tense silence until they were called back in. The magistrate looked stern, but not hostile. "After reviewing the evidence and testimony, this office finds insufficient proof of commercial mining operations. While there is evidence of mineral extraction, it appears consistent with small-scale, subsistence-level activity not requiring permits under territorial regulations." He looked directly at Eliza. "Mrs. Rourke, Mr. Rourke, you're free to go. However, any future mineral extraction on your property must be properly permitted. Consider this a warning." Relief hit so hard Eliza's legs went weak. Caleb caught her elbow, keeping her upright while Garrett gathered papers, and the mining officials looked frustrated. Pritchard intercepted them on the courthouse steps, his face dark with anger. "You lied in there." "We told the truth," Caleb said. "You just didn't like it." "This isn't over." "Yeah, it is. You lost, Pritchard. Again." Eliza felt something fierce rise in her chest. "You've been circling this ranch since my father died, trying to steal it through debt and technicalities and legal tricks. But we're still standing, and we're not going anywhere." Everyone has a breaking point. Maybe, but you won't be the one to find ours. They walked away, leaving him fuming on the steps. By the time they reached the horses, Eliza was shaking, not with fear, but with adrenaline and victory and the pure satisfaction of watching a bully finally lose. "We did it," she said. "We did. He's going to come after us again. Probably, but we'll handle it. Same as we handle everything else." The ride home felt different, lighter, like they'd crossed some invisible line from victims to victors. The ranch appeared on the horizon looking solid and real, proof that fighting dirty when necessary wasn't the same as being dirty. That night they celebrated quietly, just the two of them, whiskey on the porch watching stars. "I've been thinking," Eliza said, "about the mine." "What about it?" "We should close it, seal it up properly, walk away while we're ahead." Caleb looked surprised. "It's still producing." "Barely. And it's the one thing Pritchard can keep coming after us about. But if we close it, focus entirely on cattle and horses, there's nothing questionable on our property. We go completely legitimate. That's a lot of money to leave on the table. It's a lot of risk to eliminate. Besides, the horses are doing well. If we put the effort we've been spending on the mine into breeding operations instead, we could make just as much without the legal problems." He considered this, swirling whiskey in his glass. "You're really ready to walk away from it? The silver's what saved us. The silver got us through, but we don't need saving anymore. We need stability." She looked at him. "What do you think?" "I think you're right. We close the mine, focus on what we can build openly. No more secrets, no more looking over our shoulders." They sealed the mine entrance the following week, using dynamite to collapse the shaft and rocks to cover the evidence. Watching the entrance disappear felt like closing a chapter. The silver had bought them time, bought them survival, but it had also nearly cost them everything. Without the mine to work, they poured energy into the ranch proper. The horse breeding program started producing results. 2 foals in the spring, both healthy and promising. The cattle herd grew to 60 head, enough to start being profitable instead of just sustainable. They hired a hand, a kid from town named Jesse who worked hard and didn't ask too many questions about the past. 2 years after paying off Pritchard, 3 years after Caleb first rode onto the property, the ranch was thriving. Not rich, but solid. Making money. Building reputation. Becoming known as a place that bred good horses and ran quality cattle. Pritchard tried twice more to cause problems. Once with a property dispute that went nowhere, once with accusations about water rights that proved baseless. Each time he came up short, and each time he seemed smaller, less threatening, more pathetic. Eventually he stopped trying. The banks survived without their debt. The town moved on, and the ranch just kept growing. On their 4th wedding anniversary, Eliza woke to find Caleb already up, standing on the porch watching sunrise. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Too much on my mind." "Good or bad?" "Good, I think." He pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "I was thinking about how different everything is. 4 years ago, I was drifting, no home, no purpose. Now I've got this, us, a future that feels real." "Having regrets?" "The opposite. I'm terrified of losing it." Eliza understood that fear. She lived with it too, the knowledge that good things could disappear as fast as they arrived. But she'd also learned something these past years. "We can't control everything," she said. "Drought might come back, prices might crash, something might happen we can't predict or prepare for. But we're not who we were 4 years ago. We're stronger. We know how to fight. Together. Together." They stood watching the sun climb, painting the land in shades of gold and amber. The ranch spread below them, fences straight, buildings solid, cattle and horses moving in distant pastures. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd almost lost a dozen times over. 6 months later, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. The realization came slowly, her body changing in ways that seemed impossible until they weren't. She told Caleb over dinner, watching his face go through shock, wonder, and terror in quick succession. "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. We should get the doctor out to confirm, but yeah, I'm sure." He set down his fork carefully, like sudden movement might break something. "We're having a baby. Looks like it. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know how to be a mother. Guess we'll figure it out." He came around the table, pulled her up into his arms, and held her like she was made of glass. I don't even have words. Me neither. The pregnancy was hard, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made ranch work nearly impossible, fear that something would go wrong. Eliza tried to keep working, but by the 6th month, Caleb put his foot down. You're done with heavy lifting. Jesse and I can handle it. I can still work. You can supervise, from a chair, with your feet up. His tone left no room for argument. I'm not losing you or the baby because you're too stubborn to rest. I hate being useless. You're growing a human. That's not useless. She wanted to argue, but her back hurt and her ankles were swollen and the baby was kicking hard enough to make breathing difficult. So she supervised from the porch, shouting instructions and hating every minute of forced relaxation. The baby came in February, in the middle of a cold snap that made the house drafty and miserable. Labor lasted 18 hours, brutal and bloody and terrifying. The doctor from town did what he could, but mostly it was Eliza enduring and Caleb pacing and nature taking its violent course. When the baby finally came, crying and red and perfect, Eliza held her daughter and felt something shift fundamentally inside her chest. This was love without conditions, without fear of loss, pure and overwhelming. She's beautiful, Caleb said, his voice rough with emotion. She's perfect. They named her Margaret, after the aunt who'd given them hope when they needed it most. Margaret Carter Rourke, heir to a ranch built on desperation and stubbornness and love that hadn't quit when quitting would have been easier. Parenthood was harder than fighting Pritchard, harder than drought or debt or anything that had come before. Sleepless nights, constant worry, the weight of keeping something so fragile alive. But it was also better. Watching Margaret grow, seeing her father's eyes in her face, knowing they'd built something that would outlast them. 5 years after Margaret's birth, the ranch had doubled in size. They'd bought adjoining property from Thompson when he retired, expanding their grazing land and water access. The horse program was producing prize stock, and the cattle operation was profitable enough to hire 2 full-time hands. Pritchard died during that 5th year, a heart attack in his office, surrounded by ledgers and money that hadn't brought him happiness. Eliza went to the funeral out of obligation, stood in the back while people said kind things that weren't quite lies, and felt nothing but tired relief. At the gravesite, one of the other bankers approached her. Mrs. Rourke wanted to extend condolences. Appreciated. Also wanted you to know we found some papers in Pritchard's desk. Seemed he'd been investigating your property for years, looking for proof of silver deposits, keeping records of your finances, building cases. And we're destroying it all. Whatever grudge he held, it dies with him. The bank has no interest in continuing his vendetta. Eliza nodded, feeling a chapter closed that she'd thought was already finished. Thank you for telling me. Walking back to where Caleb waited with Margaret, now 5 and impatient with formal events, Eliza felt the last weight lift. Pritchard was gone. The debt was ancient history. The ranch was theirs, free and clear and thriving. 10 years after Caleb first rode onto the property with nothing but a horse and desperation to offer, the ranch was unrecognizable. 120 head of cattle, 15 horses, 2 hired hands, a house expanded to fit a growing family. They had a son now, too, James, 3 years old and wild as the wind. The silver mine was a memory, grass growing over where the entrance had been. The struggles felt distant, like stories about different people. Eliza stood on the porch one evening, watching Caleb teach Margaret to rope while James played in the dirt, and tried to remember that desperate 23-year-old who'd faced losing everything. She was still there, somewhere inside, but buried under years of hard-won peace. Caleb joined her, leaving the kids to their play. What are you thinking about? How far we've come. How different everything is. Better different? So much better, it's almost scary. He pulled her close, a gesture that had become comfortable over years of practice. You ever regret it? Staying? Fighting? Never. You? Not once. They stood together watching their children, watching the land they'd nearly lost, watching the life they'd built from nothing but stubbornness and silver and love that hadn't known when to quit. The ranch would outlast them, would pass to Margaret and James, would carry their names and their story, would stand as proof that desperate choices could become legacies. Years later, when Margaret was old enough to ask about how her parents met, Eliza told her the truth about debt and drought and a stranger who'd offered an impossible bargain, about fighting when fighting seemed futile, about finding silver and love in places they weren't supposed to exist. Were you scared? Margaret asked. Terrified. Every day. But you did it anyway. We did it anyway. Your father and I, together. Margaret processed this, serious and thoughtful beyond her years. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you. Eliza smiled, touching her daughter's face. You already are, sweetheart. You come from a long line of stubborn women who don't quit. Your grandmother, your great-aunt Margaret, me. It's in your blood. And Dad? Your dad's the one who taught me that being scared and being brave aren't opposites. You can be both. Usually are. That night, lying in bed beside Caleb, Eliza thought about legacy and what they were leaving behind. Not just land or cattle or horses, but something more. The knowledge that impossible situations had solutions if you were willing to fight dirty and love hard and refuse to quit when everyone expected you to. The ranch had started as her father's dream, became her burden, transformed into their salvation, and now stood as their legacy. Every fence post told a story. Every building held memories of construction and struggle and triumph. Outside, the Arizona night was cool and clear, stars thick overhead, the land breathing quietly. The well they'd drilled still flowed. The cattle grazed peacefully. The horses ran in distant pastures. And inside the house that had nearly been lost a dozen times, a family slept secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would come and they'd face it together. Eliza Carter Rourke had fought for this life with everything she had made impossible choices and dangerous bargains, had married a stranger and fallen in love with intention, had bent laws and buried secrets and survived when survival seemed unlikely. And she'd do it all again in a heartbeat. The ranch was hers. The life was hers. The future stretched ahead, uncertain as futures always are, but facing it didn't seem so terrifying anymore. She'd learned something valuable in all those years of fighting. Hope wasn't stupid, love wasn't weakness, and sometimes the most desperate gambles paid off in ways you couldn't imagine when you were placing the bet. Caleb stirred beside her, reaching for her hand even in sleep, and she held on. They'd face whatever came next the same way they'd faced everything else. Together, stubborn, refusing to quit. And that would be enough.